The moment Tom Bower picked up the phone, everything Meghan thought was safely buried started shaking, because when he calls journalists, it's never gossip, it's a warning shot. This isn't about rumors. This is about a story the world thought it understood suddenly cracking wide open, and the silence that followed making it even louder. Something about Lilibet's story doesn't line up anymore, and everyone at the very top knows it.
That Harry was running out there in 2018. Bex and the family, including Victoria, all...
She's got to take the monarchy onto the next stage. She's got to anticipate that there's a whole new 2 generations. He has made a fortune, and still does, from Spare and the Netflix series. Absolutely. And he says such terrible things about...
When Tom Bower starts making calls to journalists, people pay attention. And this time, the name on everyone's lips was Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor. But here's where the stomach drop begins. His version doesn't match the story we've all been fed. And the wildest part? The palace hasn't said a word. Not one whisper. No denial. No clarification. Nothing. That kind of silence isn't calm. It's calculated. Or it's panic. Behind the scenes, this wasn't some off-the-cuff comment or a stray theory tossed into the media cycle. Bower doesn't move like that. He never has. This is a man who prepares like a general heading into war. Advanced copies, notes flagged, timelines double-checked, and quiet calls placed to senior editors before anything sees daylight. This was a full professional operation, locked and loaded. And when that machine starts moving, people don't ask if something's coming. They ask how bad it's going to get. Because Bower doesn't speculate. He corrects. And that single word is what sent a chill through royal media circles.
The whole description she does of the Portland hospital, the birth, that was completely fabricated.
That reputation? It matters. Decades of sourcing inside institutions, cross-checking accounts, waiting when others rush. When Tom Bower speaks, journalists lean forward, not back. This wasn't Twitter noise. This wasn't tabloid frenzy. This was Bower, the guy who doesn't enter a story unless he plans to rearrange how it's understood. And what stunned people at those early briefings wasn't some explosive new scandal. It was colder than that. Bower wasn't dropping a bomb, he was adjusting the coordinates. He called it a correction, and that's far more dangerous, because a revelation can be denied. A correction forces everyone to look again. Here's where the tension snapped tight. Instead of shouting, "Look at this shocking thing," Bower calmly asked, "Are we sure we got this right in the first place?" And that question, that single quiet question, destabilized everything.
Happy family. I think they have to appeal to the youth of Britain, who are not natural monarchists.
He went straight for the foundation. How Lilibet was described from day one. The timing of announcements, the wording, who said what, and when. Not accusing, not emotional, just pointing out gaps. Not lies, gaps, drifting details. Things that didn't quite lock together when you laid them out side by side, and that's why royal editors froze. Because Bower doesn't play clickbait games. He plays documentation. He avoids drama, and that's exactly why his work sticks. When he surfaces with something, there are receipts somewhere in the background, even if he doesn't wave them in your face. The effect wasn't explosive.
Were tightly staged. This wasn't proof, but it was pattern, and pattern is where belief starts to harden.
It was unsettling, like a slow tremor under a solid-looking floor. Coverage around royal children has always been handled with extreme caution, almost sacred ground. But Bower complicated that instinct. You can't just ignore him and hope it evaporates, because his work doesn't evaporate. It embeds, it gets cited, it becomes part of the permanent record. And here's what really rattled nerves. His tone, calm, precise, no agenda visible. If he'd come in swinging with accusations, it would have been easy to dismiss. But this forced a shift. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about intent or emotion. It was about whether things matched up. And once that question is raised, especially by someone like Bower, it doesn't go away. It lingers. It demands answers. And the longer those answers don't come, the heavier the silence becomes. Inside Buckingham Palace, absolute chaos, closed-door panic. Advisors split into camps almost instantly, and both sides were terrified, just for completely different reasons. One side said, "Do nothing, this involves a child." Absolute silence. Royal kids are off limits, always have been. Touching it would look like institutional overreach. The other side saw disaster looming.
Actress. And you raised this extraordinary beginning of the year in when she carved 2025.
If we say nothing, they argued, people will assume he's right. In cases like this, silence doesn't stay neutral, it chooses a side. When an investigative author presents corrections with supporting material, no response can feel like confirmation. And here's the part that twisted the knife. The palace didn't even create Meghan's version of events. This wasn't their statement being challenged. It was an external author questioning an external narrative. So did they even own the responsibility to correct it? That question nearly broke the room. Because while the palace didn't author the story, narratives involving royal births always come with an unspoken understanding, quiet awareness, background coordination, a shared reality that keeps public facts aligned. So by staying quiet, were they avoiding overreach or abandoning responsibility? The argument went in brutal circles. Respond, and you open the floodgates. Every author demands answers. Every journalist expects confirmation or denial. Say nothing, and Bauer's version hardens into accepted history. Tick. Talk. They chose silence. No background briefings, no anonymous corrections, no subtle steering through trusted intermediaries. Nothing. For an institution famous for quietly guiding coverage, that stillness was deafening. And that decision detonated somewhere else entirely, right under Meghan. Her power has always been narrative control. From blog days to Hollywood to royalty, she chose the framing, the language, the meaning. But this was different. Bauer didn't attack. He didn't accuse. He didn't dramatize. He just laid things out and walked away. That kind of exposure is brutal because there's nothing emotional to fight back against. Media panels flipped overnight. Feelings disappeared from the conversation. Verification took over. Analysts replayed old announcement footage. Timelines, headlines, images meant to signal order suddenly felt off. And with every hour of palace silence, Meghan stood more alone. Harry? Gone quiet. No context, no defense, no reframing. For someone who usually jumps in to humanize and explain, the absence was glaring, and fair or not, appearances matter. This one made it look like she was carrying the weight solo. Supporters cried foul. Critics doubled down. And through it all, Bauer stayed steady, calm, methodical, paper over passion. That's when the word exposed started sticking, not as an accusation, but as a description. Her story wasn't destroyed, it was questioned. And unanswered questions don't fade, they settle. And this was only the beginning. And here's where it stopped being loud news and started becoming permanent. Because scandals burn hot and die fast, but unanswered corrections? Those live forever. By day 2, the media wasn't asking what happened anymore. That question was already slipping out of reach. The new question was far more dangerous. What version is going to stick? Because once a narrative crosses that line, from debate into background understanding, you don't pull it back, you live with it. Every panel discussion started sounding the same. Not outrage, not sympathy, calculation. Analysts talked about timelines, not trauma, documentation, not feelings. And quietly, almost clinically, Tom Bauer's version started getting treated less like an alternative and more like an update. And Meghan felt that shift immediately. This wasn't an attack she could counter with emotion or lived experience. This wasn't someone accusing her of bad intent. This was someone calmly suggesting that the public understanding might be incomplete, and then letting the silence do the rest. No matter how strong your personal truth is, it collapses under one brutal reality. Public memory doesn't run on feelings. It runs on what can be found, cited, and repeated. And that's when the visuals started changing. Footage from recent appearances replayed with new commentary layered on top. Analysts insisted they weren't reading into body language, and then did exactly that. A tight smile. Eyes that didn't quite meet the camera, pauses that suddenly felt longer than before. Headlines didn't accuse, they implied, and implication is far harder to fight than accusation. Supporters pushed back hard, saying it was invasive, unfair, cruel even, to analyze someone's expressions during a storm they didn't create. Critics shrugged and said it didn't matter. Once the story takes hold, everything gets interpreted through that lens. Fairness stops being the point, perception takes over, and all the while, Bauer stayed exactly where he'd started, calm, unbothered, returning again and again to process. Timelines, records, what could be checked, what couldn't. He never speculated about motives, never hinted at intention. That restraint was surgical because it left no emotional angle to attack. And then there was Harry. His silence didn't just register, it echoed. This was the man who'd built an entire public identity around speaking up, around context, around pushing back when stories felt unfair, He'd done it before, loudly, emotionally, repeatedly, but this time, nothing. Some said he was being advised to stay out. That engaging would only drag Lilibet further into the spotlight. That silence was protection. Others weren't so generous. They said this was different because there was no obvious counter. No clean rebuttal to calm documentation. And maybe, just maybe, there were details he couldn't fully verify himself. That possibility unsettled people even more. Because whether he couldn't or wouldn't respond, the result was the same. Meghan standing alone in the public eye while her story was quietly re-examined. The couple that had always presented as united suddenly looked uneven. Not broken, but asymmetrical. And in royal narratives, asymmetry gets noticed fast. By the end of the week, the palace's silence had become its own headline. Commentators stopped asking if Buckingham would respond and started asking why they hadn't. For an institution famous for behind-the-scenes nudging, the total absence of even anonymous guidance felt deliberate, and that interpretation carried consequences. Because when an institution known for subtle correction refuses to correct, people assume there's nothing they can safely say. Not confirmation, not denial, just avoidance. And avoidance reads as discomfort. That's when royal watchers started saying the quiet part out loud. The palace had chosen itself over Meghan. Not out of cruelty, not out of malice, but out of precedent. Respond once, and you're trapped forever. Ignore it, and one person takes the hit. They made their choice. And for Meghan, that meant time turned into an enemy. Every day without pushback gave Bowers' framing more oxygen. Not explosive oxygen, slow burning. The kind that settles into footnotes, side paragraphs, background context in future documentaries and biographies. That's the part people underestimate. Years from now, when someone looks up Lilibet's story, they won't just see the original announcement. They'll see the follow-up, the questions, the correction that was never answered. And that second layer becomes the fuller picture, not because it was proven, but because it was never challenged. That's how public memory works, not by verdict, by accumulation. And Meghan knows this. For someone who spent her life shaping narrative with intention, this was a rare moment of losing the wheel. Not through scandal, not through betrayal, but through methodical doubt. Someone else steering the conversation without raising their voice, and the institutions that could have balanced it deciding not to. Her supporters reframed the argument emotionally. They said technicalities shouldn't matter, that love and meaning outweigh paperwork and timelines, that naming a child is personal, not procedural. And on a human level, that argument lands. But public history doesn't operate on human levels. It operates on records. And critics kept circling back to the same point. Once you put a story into the public domain, especially one tied to royal protocol, accuracy matters. Not intention, not emotion, accuracy. Neither side was ever going to convince the other because they weren't even arguing from the same foundation. One side measured truth by lived experience, the other by documentation, and those two worlds rarely overlap cleanly. So what remained wasn't resolution, it was ambiguity. A question mark where certainty used to be. No accusations proven, no secrets confirmed, just a credible voice asking questions, and no equally credible voice answering them. That gap became the story. And the palace's logic, stripped of all polish, was simple. Take the damage now, or create a precedent that never ends. From their perspective, sacrificing one narrative was better than sacrificing control forever. But that calculation didn't soften the reality for Meghan. She absorbed the fallout alone. No institutional cover, no official framing. Just her own influence versus Bowers' credibility, and in that equation, credibility weighs more over time. The biggest shift wasn't public outrage, it was expectation. People now expect Lilibet's story to come with an asterisk. But then attached to the what happened. And once that happens, the ground shifts under every future conversation. Nothing explosive needed to happen, nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just silence meeting scrutiny. And that silence said more than any statement ever could. This wasn't about proving wrongdoing. It was about who gets believed when memory gets written, about what survives when headlines fade, and about what happens when someone raises questions and the people who could answer decide it's safer not to. That's why this story matters. Not because of what was revealed, but because of what wasn't said. And once that door opens, it never fully closes again. If you're ready to keep going deeper into how this changes everything moving forward, just say the word.